Robert Saylor was born with Down syndrome. On January 12, 2013, he died after allegedly being forcibly removed from a movie theater by 3 Frederick County off-duty police officers. The case was ruled a homicide, which many initially found confusing. This is the first in a series of shows asking the question, are law enforcement officers given sufficient training? How are the Down syndrome community reacting to this tragedy? And more importantly, how can it be avoided? On today's show, I talked to past president of the ARC of Washington County, Gary Rohrer, and father to a Down syndrome child. Welcome to Insight. The medical definition of someone Down syndrome is that they have 47 chromosomes instead of 46. And of course, the scientific definitions are very complicated. But how would you describe the characteristics of your daughter?
Well, there are various degrees of Down syndrome. They vary widely. But basically, Jamie is very much the mind of, say, a second grader. Her ability to reason, but that really depends upon the individual and obviously their primary years and how much quality of time the family spends with them, and that can vary.
How does she react in new environments?
New environments, when she first walks in, she will kind of assess the locale, if you will, in her own way, and she'll wait to see how the people are with her are reacting. There are some Downs, as I said earlier, that are very gregarious and they're not as reserved and held back. But Jamie tends to, she's somewhat introverted in that manner until she sees just how things are.
Now, obviously, being so involved with ARC of Washington County and having a daughter who's Down syndrome yourself, I'm sure that you were following the Robert Saylor story. What was your initial reaction when you heard the story?
Well, it was tragic. Whether it was a Down syndrome or any young person, it was a tragedy in and of its own right. And my first reaction was, wow, I wonder what triggered all of this. I'm hearing different accounts and trying not to be accusatory because I don't know all the facts and I don't know the story on either side.
Right, and you know, very much the show is not about pointing the finger and finding the blame here, but kind of just trying to open people's eyes as to, you know, how to deal with people who are socially slow to develop, who are, you know, not as able-bodied. Now, experts say that Down syndrome have varying intellectual abilities, but their physical appearance is widely recognized. Do you think that perhaps when Robert was being dealt with, his physical appearance wouldn't have triggered in the off-duty officers, you know, some sort of caution?
I would like to think that it would have done that. Obviously, there is the Down syndrome individual stands out, and certainly there are sometimes physical limitations, but also they are mentally challenged in most instances, and they're very set in their ways sometimes. They're very obsessive compulsive. I find that in our daughter, but I also find that with patience I can reason with her.
How would your daughter react? And I ask this question because the mother of Robert Saylor was quoted as saying that no stranger had ever put their hands on Robert. How would Jamie react if a stranger tried to touch her?
She would not act at all favorably. She'd be very resentful. It's not necessarily understood that that person has the authority to do that. She has been brought up to respect law enforcement and police officers and to recognize that, but if somebody's in plain clothes in particular and they're going to approach her with some authority, she does not know them, she's going to be very resentful and resistant because she's protecting herself.
In your experience of working with Down syndrome, is that pretty standard across the board, that if a stranger tried to approach them and tried to touch them, that they wouldn't act favorably?
Well, especially a female, because like all of our daughters, we want to protect them. A child in particular, and Jamie thinks in the frame of a child. So consequently, she's always been taught, especially in inappropriate places, if anybody touches you, you resist. And if it's somebody that she doesn't know at all, regardless of where they touch, she's going to be resistant because she doesn't understand the concept of plain clothes. She's taught to recognize a uniformed police officer. We do encourage her to respect authority, people that are responsible for her, a school teacher, someone that she's been taught has authority and has supervision of her. Whether it's on the job, we always drill that in about your boss. It's important to obey your boss and to listen to what they want to do. But there's that built-in defense mechanism of if somebody ever touches you and it's not appropriate, don't let them do that.
What can be done, do you think, to prevent this happening again to someone who is not only widely recognized in their appearance, but someone who, requires just a little bit more patience than the average person?
Well, I'm far from an expert, but as a parent of Down syndrome, my first suggestion in being involved with the ARC as I am, my first suggestion would be that at least at the bare minimum, law enforcement officers be given some type of overview or training identifying a Down syndrome and understanding the way they basically function or think, and obviously from that leads patience. It would also be helpful to rely on the person that they are with. Certainly it's very unlikely that they're traveling alone, so if there's a guardian or someone accompanying them, ideally a parent, but you really want to rely on that individual to help you in such a situation, to reason with them.
Gary feels like many that training should be available to law enforcement. In our next edition of Insight, we asked the question how much training is given. While the County of Frederick were invited to participate in the show, they declined. So we headed to the City of Frederick to hear about their training program and their initiatives.
Well, each year we have what's called a mandated hourly training as sent down by the Maryland Police Training Commission. Those hours, as the state requires, are 18 hours. The Frederick Police Department goes above and beyond those 18 hours. We require our officers at minimum to receive 42 hours of continuous training. And within that training...
More from the Frederick Police Department coming up on our new show. We also look at the restrictions on the work that can be carried out by law enforcement officers off duty. For more information on Down syndrome and the work of ARC of Washington County, you can visit the following website. Until next time, here on Insight, cheerio.